Here we grow again. It's time for the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson, as we broadcast from beautiful Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. Today, Stacy, we talk about self-sowing plants. Many plants will self-sow. You think about the maples and their winged fruit, the samaras. As kids, we call them helicopters, floating to the earth and seeding in your lawn or your landscape. Or you think about perennial plants like lupins. I love lupins. And they self-sow with a vengeance. Proven Winners has the West Country lupins, a variety like Manhattan. Wow, those things are incredible. Super colorful. I call them traffic cones when they're in bloom. But today, as we talk about self-sowing plants, let's start with annuals, because annuals are plants that can drop seed in your garden before they die, germinate on their own the following year, and well, it's kind of like a bonus when that happens, right?
It is a bonus. And what I particularly love about self-sowing plants, and I do just want to clarify for anyone listening, we are saying sow as an S-O-W.
Yes.
Like seed sowing. So they're not sewing themselves a blanket or anything like that. We're talking about seed sowing. I love self-sowing plants because, you know, they take the guesswork out of design. They pop up wherever they will. Point. And a lot of times they are doing work that you as the gardener would never think to put those plants together. And self-sowers pop up and you think, well, shoot, I'm a genius.
I love that perspective. That is excellent. That really is. You know, and when we talk about self-sowing annuals, and there's many different plants, and we'll get into that, but many Proven Winners annuals are sterile. So we'll mention that from the top, meaning they don't produce seeds. And these plants have been developed. It enables the plant to focus energy on creating more blooms instead of seeds, and why they bloom so strongly, and you don't need deadheading. But still, there are many plants that can give us that added bonus of blooming. Now, I think right off the top, Stacy, about plants, I've mentioned often my love for supertunias like bubblegum, right, which is sterile and blooms its head off. But for me, someone who's been in the industry for a long time, a perfect example is sweet alyssum.
Oh, perfect one. Yeah, my friend in New Jersey, her mom had sweet alyssum self-sowing in her front stairs up to her house. And it was just, you know, the sweetest, most charming look. It's, you know, if you like the cottage garden look, yep, self-sowing plants are your best friend.
Yeah, now today, instead of sweet alyssum, often referred to as lobularia. And when I first started out in the industry, there were flats and varieties of plants that were called royal carpet or carpet of snow or rosy o'day. And the plant being in the mustard family, it seeded like crazy. It'd be beautiful in early spring because it liked the cool temperatures, and then it would wear out as we got into the heat of summer. Today, the lobularia varieties, Proven Winners, offers a number of different types, including Snow Princess, which is both cold and heat tolerant and is sterile, so that particular flowering annual has come a long way since 30, 40 years ago.
It has people totally think about that plant differently, but you know what hasn't changed is it smells amazing. Mm-hmm. I love the fragrance. And you know, Snow Princess has larger flowers. Again, since it doesn't set seed, it's putting all that energy into flower production, which is a very good thing. But I think there's room for both. You know, you can put your Snow Princess in your containers to really enjoy that strong flower performance, and then let those old-fashioned types kind of self-sow around in your garden, again, to get that cottage garden look, and they're great pollinator plants as well.
Yeah, exactly. So let me, right off the bat, give you a limerick about self-sowing plants. It's just very short. These plants, I do not know where from. It must be my prolific green thumb. The seedlings have become invasive. Their presence is pervasive. I'll sell them for disposable income.
Well, you know, you do see that. You do see people taking things that self-sow and putting them in little containers and selling them, you know, next to their driveway. That is not unheard of in these parts.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's get into some herbs and veggies here a minute, because I know you really appreciate that in the garden, Stacy. And when it comes to self-sow, we would be able to do a number of episodes on this. I want to just throw out there initially right off the bat, borage.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Is it?
I love it.
Okay.
Now,
because it's controversial.
It's controversial.
Because it seeds like crazy.
It does.
It can get out of hand.
So I did have it at my old house. And then when we moved into my new house, my husband said, "You're not planting that borage again, are you?" And to be fair, I have not. But I do love it. First of all, it does self-sow, and it self-sows quite a bit, but very, very easy to manage. You know, the seedlings are super easy to just rip out. And then the thing about borage, I think, as a self-sower is it does make kind of a large plant. It makes like a rosette, and that can shade out its neighbors. But when it does flower, you know, we just had the blue flower show, the blue plant show, absolutely gorgeous, heavenly blue flowers.
Beautiful.
And they taste like cucumbers.
Yeah.
I love the flavor of borage. They taste just like cucumbers. It's common to, you know, use them as a garnish on salads. You can also put them in ice cubes if you want to get real fancy with them. So they're eminently useful as much as they are prolific. I love it.
See, we did not plan this in advance, and I knew if I just said borage, Stacy would take off with it.
Yeah, I love
that.
it.
That's fantastic. Now, a lot of people will plant borage because they consider it to be a good companion plant to deal with insects. But if you think about it, borage in the vegetable garden also as a pollinator, or great plant for pollinators. And then we have other cool season vegetables like spinach, mustard greens, lettuce. I think in a show a few weeks ago, you mentioned dill.
Oh, yep. Dill self-sows in my garden. And, you know, a lot of people, I think when we were talking about starting seeds in the spring, people are out there buying dill from the store or trying to start it indoors. Honestly, the best thing you can do, sprinkle the seed around in your garden in spring, let it do its thing, let it go to flower, and then let dill figure it out. That's what that's what I like about self-sowers.
It's a big deal. Yes. To put that in your garden. But yes, prolific self-seeder. Arugula, we've talked about that.
Yeah, you know, I love my arugula. I have the wild arugula, Diplotaxis, not the cultivated arugula, which is Aruca sativa. But it self-sows all over my garden. Again, very easy to manage. And this is a difference sort of, I think, between a self-sower and a weed. As a weed is hard to pull out, you know, like a tree can be very difficult. But something like the arugula, super easy to pull out wherever it comes from. And honestly, any day in the summer, pretty much, I can walk out into my backyard and harvest an arugula salad, and I have done zero work to get it.
I love it. And so good for you, too. Arugula, so good for you. And you mentioned weeds. Yeah, weeds are great self-sowers. I think about teasel, Dame's rocket in the ditches or the roadways, and how fat. But some people love it because it's so beautiful when it's in flower. You think about garlic mustard or hairy bittercress, and
those are some bad ones.
You know, I always wanted to start a rock band called Teasel and the Dame's Rockets. I always thought that would be a great name. Yeah. So as far as seed from annuals are concerned, throw a couple quick ones out here. You've mentioned on previous shows flax.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Good
so we'd have to have that on the list. Plant. Moss rose, cleome, nasturtiums. They're popping up in my garden all the time.
Love nasturtiums.
Yeah,
can't get enough of those.
And edible. Calendula, bachelor button. So that, you know, there's a number of what we'll consider self-seeders. So again, as far as annuals are concerned, many of the new varieties are sterile. That causes them to be tremendous bloomers. That's great. But there are also self-sowers, and there's kind of a reward to it. I love it the following year when I have tomato plants that are popping up in my vegetable garden.
Yeah, you know, people, you know, because tomatoes are a warm climate plant, people are often surprised to find out that tomatoes are remarkably persistent.
They are.
And any that you left to kind of sit around on the ground will almost certainly pop up the next year. Now, you never know what you're going to get. If you have an heirloom variety, you're probably going to get something very close to, if not mostly identical to the same plant you grew previously. But if it's a hybrid plant, it's anybody's guess. And that's part of the fun.
Love it. The Self-Sow Show. We'll continue with this topic. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about heirlooms during the mailbag segment of today's show. But first, we're going to have plants on trial. Stacy's going to introduce us to a beauty that you should have in your landscape. That's coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where we were talking about self-sowers. That's S-O-W-E-R-S, plants that pop up in your yard. And like I said, there's a difference between self-sowers and weeds. Weeds, of course, are self-sowing plants. That's why they become problematic. But other self-sowing plants can be quite useful, like we were talking about arugula, thyme. And so when it comes to shrubs and what plant we're going to put on trial, I always try to relate it somehow. And I wanted to pick a plant today that it does not self-sow, but sometimes it gets painted with too broad a stroke, and people think it does, so they won't plant it. And that plant is Sunny Boulevard Hypericum.
Love this.
It just suddenly appeared in the studio. What do you know? So Hypericum is generally known, as its common name is St. John's wort. And I think a lot of people are familiar with it, not as a plant, but as an herbal supplement.
Exactly.
It is believed to alleviate depression or bad moods. And I think when you look at the plant and these fabulous bright yellow flowers, it's easy to see why. I mean, how can you not smile when you look at these things? They are the definition of cheerfulness.
I'm not ingesting it, and I'm smiling.
Exactly. But, one of the things that often happens with other plants is that because people just hear Hypericum or they just hear St. John's wort, and they may know that there are Hypericums or St. John's wort that are weedy. They are invasive. They have come in from other countries. They're taking over. But that does not mean that all Hypericum are the same. And so this particular variety that we have here, this is Sunny Boulevard Hypericum. It is Hypericum calmianum, and it is, in fact, a North American native. It grows throughout the Midwest here, even all the way over to the East Coast. And this one is not going to become invasive.
See, people are going to love that, Stacy, because, again, Hypericum, you said calmianum.
Calmianum, yes.
Because there are different types of Hypericum. I did a little research, and some Hypericums were brought by European settlers to the U.S., but this is a North American native. And in my research, Peter Kalm, a student of the father of botanical nomenclature, Carl Linnaeus, who discovered the plant in the wild in North America in the 1700s.
Right, and so Peter Kalm was a very important figure. Hypericum calmianum is named after him, and he has a whole genus named for him, Kalmia, which is our fabulous native mountain laurel.
Fantastic.
Which I think we had a mailbag question about that a few months ago, back in the spring. So Peter Kalm, Swedish guy, big fan of North American native flowers and foliage. And that is what brings us to this plant. So now most of the invasive Hypericums out there are actually herbaceous plants.
Okay.
So they're not woody plants. They're herbaceous perennials. They die back to the ground. And, certainly when you see the flowers, or if you look up, invasive Hypericum, you'll see that the flowers are really nothing like this. They're small. They don't have this fabulous sunburst in the center of each of the flowers. So it's important as you learn more about plants to not just assume that just because you hear this genus or this common name and you hear that some of it is invasive, to dig a little bit deeper, to find out more. And one of the things that I love the most about this plant, there's two things I love most about this plant. Number one, it really naturally takes on a nice rounded shape. And it's not too dense, it's not too meatball-y, which, I kind of prefer things to be a little bit more wild and open looking. I know some people do like the meatball look, but I do like the natural shape that it takes on. And it's covered in these yellow flowers, basically all of July and August. So it's here in the studio. If you want to check us out on YouTube, you will see it here on the studio table. And like I said, each bloom is kind of crowned with this little sunburst of stamens for a really unique look. And this will not become invasive. It's not going to set seed and pop up all over your yard. It's just a really, really nice choice, even if you aren't into native plants. Full sun. This is a plant definitely for full sun. But if you can give it that, I think that you're really going to be happy with how long it blooms and all the pollinators that it attracts.
When you look at the long blooming and the time of year that it blooms, to me, it's similar in the landscape to potentilla, a completely different plant, but kind of has that same kind of working nature in our landscape.
I'm really glad you mentioned the connection to potentilla because this is not as it is. So both Potentilla and St. John's wort are not super heat tolerant plants.
Okay.
I know that's dangerous talk these days when so many people are working through so much heat. Both of the plants are pretty much hardy from like zone 4 to 7, so not going into the heat. But I think that if you like Potentilla, you like how long it blooms, this makes a really nice alternative. It's much, much less susceptible to spider mites than Potentilla. And Potentilla, great plant, very deer resistant, native. I do like Potentilla a lot. But because it is so dense and low, it can get outbreaks of spider mites, and that's really not going to be an issue with this. In fact, speaking of challenging conditions, Sunny Boulevard Hypericum last year won a Blue Ribbon Award for drought tolerance from the University of California, Davis Drought Trials.
Wow.
So that's some pretty high praise.
That is.
Because, it's one thing to say, it's drought tolerant in Michigan, quite another to say it's drought tolerant in California. And these Blue Ribbon Trials, they have beds at the University of California, Davis with tons and tons of plants. We had some other plants win too, including Pugster Blue Buddleia and Jukebox Pyrocomeles. But this one I thought was particularly interesting because, when it comes to drought tolerance, you have plants that can just survive, like they'll come out of drought and not die, and plants that will actually continue doing what you purchased them for. And this is in the latter. So if you can grow it, even under challenging drought conditions, you're still going to get these really, really nice flowers. And to me, that is hugely important because I don't want to water.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. Now, we've already established that the plant is native to North America. And if you're keeping score at home, the plant is Sunny Boulevard Hypericum, and you'll get information at our website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Stacy, the story behind it, I'm going to guess that it was developed right here in West Michigan. Am I right or wrong?
You are right, Rick. You are right on the nose. And this is an example of one of our earlier plants where, we weren't really setting out to breed something. We were early in the life of Proof of Winner's Color Choice Shrubs. A lot of what we were doing was just looking at native plants and trying to find outliers, and when, this is interesting because it does tie back into seeds, when plants interhybridize, so, you have one plant over here, one plant over here, a bee pollinates them, that seed now has multiple genetics in it, and as a result, the seed that comes out of it can be different than its parents. And what we noticed about this one is that it really had that nice dense habit, bigger flowers, because that's important. If you were to see Hypericum calmeanum in the wild, you probably would not look at it quite like Sunny Boulevard and go, whoa, those are huge, interesting flowers. They would be smaller and a little less conspicuous. And that's what we're looking for is, can we get all of those good qualities of the native plant, the drought tolerance and the ability to attract pollinators, but also get it in a kind of habit and with flowering that makes people actually want to, put it in their landscape. So yeah, the original genetics for this are actually from right here in Michigan. So talk about a native plant. And it's been around for a while, but I think it's really sort of undergoing a renaissance since it won this drought tolerance award in California. But overall, in terms of growing it, like I said, full sun. So you're going to want at least 6 hours of sun each day to grow this successfully. Not really going to need much pruning at all. It does naturally take on this rounded habit. But if you are a meatballer and you like that nice dense look, you can certainly do that. You would do that in spring. It blooms on new wood, and then it will just keep putting on these flowers. Other than that, it really doesn't need anything. It doesn't, get any kinds of diseases or problems. It's just a super easy to grow, very agreeable plant. And one, again, just to go back to why I picked it, because it's not going to self-sow for you, but you should not assume that it's going to be like all of those other weedy hypericums that would. So
I love that. And I think I mentioned this before, but with hypericum, I'm pretty sure if you go to Cedar Point, the amusement park, when you're inverted on one of those roller coasters, there's a huge bed of hypericum in bloom. Yes, I had my eyes open. But the point that I'm trying to make here, Stacy, is the bloom time, July, August, prime time, fantastic.
That was a very wise planting choice on the behalf of the Cedar Point landscape designers. So salute to you. If you want to learn more about Sunny Boulevard Hypericum, just visit gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. We will have pictures. We will have links to it on the Proven Winners Color Choice website and everything else you need to know. We're going to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we're opening up that gardening mailbag, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. You know, I do love helping people become better gardeners, helping them demystify gardening, simplify gardening, if you will. So I always love opening up the mailbag, and I know we're a little bit behind on questions, so I want to thank everybody who's written to us. I will get back to you eventually. Some of the questions I can't answer on air because they're just too complicated to answer, but I do respond, and I appreciate anyone who sends in pictures because you know what? Gardening is... I don't have a crystal ball, so pictures help us always give you the best possible answer. So what do we got in the mailbag this week, Rick?
All right, Michelle is asking us, I'm growing heirloom tomatoes and lettuce this year from seeds received at a seed exchange. That's cool. The plants look marvelous. I'd love to harvest their seeds to use in next year's garden. Is there a special trick to saving tomato and lettuce seeds to ensure viability next season?
Such a good question, and so timely with our self-sowing show as well. So as Rick explained, you don't have to really try necessarily to save tomato seeds. If you leave some, you know, invariably, even with our best intent, some tomatoes fall off the vine. We forget about them. They pop up for years to come. With heirloom tomatoes, it might be different, particularly if they're larger fruited, though, because you're not, you know, you put so much energy into those. You're not letting those just fall by the wayside and rot. So in that case, to make sure that you have the best success with the seed, you want to take that tomato when it's fully ripe, squeeze out the seed, and rinse it, and then put it in like a little plastic cup or something disposable or that you don't care too much about with a little bit of water. And what's going to happen is those seeds are going to develop mold. That's good.
That's very good.
You want that to happen.
So to speak.
Yeah. So don't panic. You want that mold to develop. And that's basically going to just kind of get them ready to go dormant. So once that mold develops, you're just going to dump that out and leave the moldy seeds kind of on a paper towel, you know, and let them dry. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the seeds, and that's pretty much all you have to do. Now, heirloom tomatoes are heirloom tomatoes because they are they're open pollinated hybrids. So you don't have to worry that the people who produced the seed made a special concerted cross to get this. Pretty much they're going to what's called come true from a seed. You know, chances are the pollinators went from one flower of whatever heirloom tomato you have to the other, and so it's going to be identical to its parents, which is what makes an heirloom an heirloom.
Yeah, and I think that's the important key. You know, I love stories that I read of years ago when families would come to the United States from Europe, and they didn't have many possessions, but they had some seeds with them in a jar.
There's nothing like the taste of home.
Exactly, and settled in New Jersey. Now, I think one of the keys here with Michelle's question also is that she mentions tomatoes and lettuce. Tomatoes and lettuce are self-pollinating plants. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you get into cucurbits like watermelon or melons or squash, then things can get a little fun because you have both the female and the male flowers on the same plant. And when we start cross-pollinating, well, some interesting stuff can happen. But because they are self-pollinating, again, that wet seed approach, I'm going to call it, that you described, Stacy, is perfect. I would say when you dry them, when I've tried this, one thing that I would recommend is possibly drying them on a ceramic plate or a cookie sheet, because sometimes on the paper toweling, when they dry, they kind of stick, and then I got to peel them off there.
That's true. Yeah, and then it's just going to hold moisture. So that's a good point. Yeah. Now the lettuce, Michelle, you're not going to have to worry about. You don't have to ferment it or anything like that. the trick with the lettuce, and a lot of people don't realize, when you're eating lettuce, you don't want it to flower, because once lettuce starts to flower, if you've ever seen it, it gets this milky sap. It is the most bitter thing you have ever tasted in your life.
It's awful.
But that's what you need to do to get to seed, because once that flower stalk starts to come up, lettuce is actually in the daisy family. A lot of people don't realize that. So you want to go ahead and let that flower stalk come up. And, naturally that's going to happen, especially if you live in a hot climate. The weather starts getting super warm and the lettuce bolts, and that means it's going to go to seed. So with the lettuce, you basically just need to let that grow, let those flowers grow up, watch for those seed pods to develop, and then collect the seed before it starts to spread on its own. So that's going to be more of a timing issue. Just be there with your little envelope or bowl or whatever when those seed pods just start to dry out. Don't wait too far, because then they'll just drop, and you'll get self-sowing lettuce in your cracks like Adriana has on her back porch. But very, very easy to collect the lettuce seeds. So I would encourage you to do that. And, if you participate in a seed library, like at your local library, this is a great way to contribute the seeds that you've taken back to that source.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, Stacy, you mentioned that important point of letting the seed dry. We don't want to put them in storage wet in any way. Put them in a good enclosed container, and then where you store it is important also.
Yeah.
We don't want fluctuating temperatures in the area where you store that.
Or high humidity.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, what do we got next?
All right, thanks, Michelle. Shirley, yikes. Shirley's saying this, not me. My Annabelle hydrangea is a mess. I had to cut it to the ground, I must confess. Down came the rain, now I'm in pain. Fixing it is hard, I guess. Wow, well done. Well done, Shirley. She says, love your show, love Rick's Limericks, but would love your help on what I should do now. So, Stacy, help Shirley out here.
I don't know if I can do it in rhyme, but I can offer a little bit of advice here. So, Shirley, Annabelle hydrangea, which of course is a native smooth hydrangea, beautiful plant, classic, but it does flop. It's just kind of one of the things that it does. Now, it certainly can be a lot worse after a rain or when you have a more mature plant, but there are a few things that you can do to minimize the flopping on Annabelle. So, number one, a lot of people cut their Annabelle hydrangeas to the ground. Do not do that. The plant will be fine. It will still grow on and grow up and flower. But when you cut, Annabelle is a shrub. It's a hydrangea, so it's a woody plant. When you whack that back to the ground every single year, all of the growth that comes up is going to be soft, herbaceous growth. And as such, it's not going to develop that wood strength to keep those blooms more upright.
That's a super important point and something you taught me, Stacy, and it makes perfect sense to me. It really does.
Right. So instead of cutting it all the way back to the ground, you're just going to cut it back by about a third its total height. So, if it's 3 feet tall, you're going to cut off the top foot. And at that same time, you're going to want to clean out any thin, spindly side branches, because those aren't really going to be very strong either. So that will help. More sun, especially if you live in a cooler climate and it can take more sun, will also help quite a bit. Anytime you grow any plant in too much shade, it starts trying to stretch and reach the light, and that's going to lead to those longer stems, which are going to be a little bit floppier. And you also don't want to over fertilize. Like one application in spring, totally fine. But if you're really over fertilizing it, and a lot of people I've found, they're not intending to over fertilize it, but they have like a lawn service or something like that comes around and is fertilizing the lawn. Well, if it's, near the lawn, then it's taking up some of that fertilizer. That will also just push a lot of soft growth. But another thing that you can consider, again, Annabelle is a classic, but we selected Incredible hydrangea specifically to be less floppy. And as it turns out, the flowers are larger. So if some people like the flopping, they make it work in their design, and that's totally cool. But if you don't like the flopping, I would recommend that you give Incredible a try. But all that said, sometimes, especially if you had a year where we haven't, like this year was a perfect storm for flopping Annabelles, because we had a very, very dry May and June. And then we've had quite a bit of rainfall in July and August so far. And that just doesn't give the plant the ability to start developing strength against the rain. So some years, unfortunately, you can do all of this and it's still going to happen. It's just one of the characteristics of the plant.
That's a great answer, Shirley. I told you Stacy would come to the rescue, and let's get together sometime and write some limericks, all right? I got to squeeze this one in a minute. Amy's asking about mock orange, wants to use it as a hedge, has difficulty finding it. She asks, is it just not popular, too old-fashioned? And I guess I'd throw in real quickly here, I love mock orange, but I understand what Amy is saying. Is it because it's a lot like forsythia, where it just blooms for a short time in spring and then it's just leafy the rest of the year, so it's more difficult to find out there?
That could be one reason. I feel my personal thoughts on it are that it's considered a bit old-fashioned and kind of fell out of favor. Now, if you smell mock orange, you're going to want it. I mean, the fragrance is just amazing.
Yes.
But also, a lot of the older varieties are huge. 10, 12 feet tall. And just, as people have demanded, less intensive landscapes and all of that, they haven't wanted such a big plant. Now, we do have a couple of proven winners mock oranges, which hopefully will help them start getting into the market. They are smaller, they're neater. It's the Illuminati series of mock orange, or Philadelphus. So I will put links to those in the show notes at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. And hopefully that will start turning things around so you can make that fabulous mock orange hedge of your dreams, Amy. All right, we got to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we've got a special guest, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. It's time for branching news, and making news this week is our interview with Andrew Bunting, who is Vice President of Horticulture and leads the utilization of planting and design to promote environmentally sound gardening practices at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. Now, Andrew received his Bachelor of Science degree in Plant and Soil Science from Southern Illinois University. He also has worked at the Chicago Botanic Garden, Chanticleer Garden, and the Scott Arboretum. And in addition to that, I saw with great interest, serves on the board of the Magnolia Society International. Andrew published his first book in 2015, The Plant Lover's Guide to Magnolias. And true to our hearts, Stacy and myself, Andrew enjoys bird watching.
Oh, nice.
And travel, and of course, gardening. Andrew, welcome to the Gardening Simplified show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. Now, the Pennsylvania Horticulture Society, in my research, says that I guess the work that it does is it works to promote access to fresh food, healthy living environments, deep social connections, and economic opportunities. Tell us a little something about the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society.
So you're absolutely right. We the work that we do really needs to do either all or some of those, we call them impact priorities, which you just listed, and we do it through a number of different ways. Some of that work is through one of our program channels, which is landscapes. So we maintain 20 different public gardens and landscapes throughout mostly Philadelphia, and one to the north of Philadelphia in Montgomery County, which is about 80 acres in total. And those are areas or gardens that are free and accessible to everyone. We also have another programmatic arm called Healthy Neighborhoods. Within that program, we have a fairly extensive street tree program where we plant about 3,000 street trees a year, and most of these are in areas of the city where there's a limited tree canopy as low as 2.5%. So that's one of our target areas. We also have, you talked about access to fresh food. We partner with about 170 community gardens. And then we also have a workforce development program and then a stormwater management program where we partner with the Philadelphia Water Department to give homeowners water mitigation solutions such as rain barrels. And then the last big programmatic arm that most people know the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society for is the Philadelphia Flower Show.
Oh, love the Philadelphia Flower Show. I tell you what, when I've gone to the Philadelphia Flower, I'll tell you what I do, Andrew, when I go to the show. Do you live in the Philadelphia area?
I do. I live just south of Philadelphia.
Okay, so Stacy, what I'll do when I go to the Philadelphia Flower Show is I'll stay in a hotel near Independence Hall, and then early one morning I'll go for a run. And what you do is you run through the 9th Street Italian Market, just like Rocky Balboa did.
I had a feeling that's where this was going.
Then past the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, you run through Chinatown, and then as you proceed to the west, you get to the Philadelphia Art Museum, and you get to run those steps like Rocky Balboa. And Andrew, boy, is that a great feeling when you get to the top of the steps.
Yeah, because there's quite a few of them.
Yeah, 72 to be exact.
Okay, 72. That's good to know.
And then your reward for the run is you get to go to the fabulous Philadelphia Flower Show.
Exactly. So tell us about the Philadelphia Flower Show, Andrew. This is when for folks who have not attended, you walk in the door and it's like, wow, it just blows you away. It's amazing.
Yeah. So the society was founded in 1827, and the flower show has been running almost every year since 1829.
Wow.
And it's mostly an indoor show. We were outdoors because of COVID in 21 and 22. We returned in 2023, so it's at the Pennsylvania Convention Center. It's usually the last couple days of February, the first week of March. In 2024, it's March 2nd through the 10th. And it's a large flower show over 10 acres indoors, and about a third of it is major exhibits. Landscapers and designers essentially put in large gardens within this space. And then the other portion are competitive classes. So there's an area called the horticulture where individuals can bring plants like house plants or cactus, succulent bulbs. There's probably 300 different categories where they bring individual plants, put them in individual classes, and then they're judged. And then there's other competitive classes like floral, pressed plants. A lot of garden clubs make little gardens. There might be a whole class in like balconies or window boxes or front stoops. There's a photography class. There's jewelry made out of natural materials. There's literally hundreds of classes where you can competitively enter. And then there's a fairly significant vendor area. So there's about 400 vendors selling, mostly horticultural-based or gardening-based products. And then there's quite a bit of education that we kind of weave through the entire show. So the show is 10 days long, and it is, if you're into gardening anywhere on the East Coast, most people try to make it to the flower show, but we get people from all over the United States, both as exhibitors and as judges, volunteers, and then as attendees of the flower show as well.
So there's something for everybody.
Yes, there's something for everyone, that's for sure.
The thing that's so amazing about the Philadelphia Flower Show is like it's timing just when you feel like you cannot take winter
You're right.
anymore. The Philadelphia Flower Show comes along and you come through those doors, and what always stands out to me in my memory is the smell of hyacinths. They're so easy to force.
I've heard that comment from dozens of people over the years, and it's you're right. It's in the Philadelphia area. It's still kind of winter. Maybe there's glimpses of spring with like witch hazels, and some of the early bulbs are just starting to poke out. So it's a great kind of kickoff to the spring gardening season in the area. And we put on the show is we want to obviously excite people about gardening, and it's obviously just a great experience. But there, like you said before, there's a little bit or a lot of content for everyone, and that definitely excites all the senses, especially the visual sense.
No, my favorite part of the Philadelphia Flower Show is by far the horticulture. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that really seems to me to sort of be like almost like a lost art or something that really isn't, you don't see that in a lot of other flower shows anymore. It used to be the thing for flower shows, right? Or flower societies, they would get together and show off their camellia blooms or like you said, cactus and succulents. But, to me, seeing what's actually happening in people's greenhouses and homes and them sharing their skill and talent and seeing everything compared, that is hands down my absolute favorite thing in the flower show.
Yeah, I agree. It's also my favorite. And you're right. I think it's to some degree like a type of gardening or displaying of gardening that was more popular, decades ago with these local shows, whether it be roses or peonies or whatever the case might be. Our show does differ a little in that all the plants are live. There's there's only one class that has cut specimens in it. And so what it's done actually is, with so many people interested in houseplants, and that seems to be a continuing trend, is we now have a lot of young people who are participating and exhibiting in the flower show, especially in the aroid classes, begonias, terrariums, gesnerias like African violets and streptocarpus and things like that. And there's fairly active societies in the Philadelphia area that are recruiting these new or younger members. And it's great to see kind of the next generation coming along. And we have a booklet that's almost 100 pages long that outlines all the classes. So we say if you have a plant, there's a class in the horticulture for you to enter it. So there's some classes that are fairly broad and open, like, 6 inches or above foliage plants. Well, that can encompass all sorts of different plants. And then there's dozens of classes that are specific to orchids. I would say the cactus and succulents are probably the most popular. But then people also, there's some local estates that bring in some mammoth specimens as well. So the only two prerequisites of entering is it has to be an individual. So business can't enter plants, but an individual could be somebody, with a couple windowsills in the city, or it could be somebody that has a massive estate with a staff that takes care of their plants. And then you have to be in possession of the plant for at least 6 months to enter it in the show.
Okay. All right. Interesting. We're chatting with Andrew Bunting, Vice President of Horticulture with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, talking about the Philadelphia Flower Show. Both Stacy and I would encourage you that if you've never gone to the Philadelphia Flower Show, you've got to have it on your list. Andrew, what is the website where people can learn more about both the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and the Philadelphia Flower Show?
Right. So you can get all your information at phsonline.org.
All right. And Andrew, before we let you go, we do this with folks that we interview on the show. We did it with Bree Arthur last week. I know it's an unfair question, but we're going to ask you for a couple of plants that Andrew absolutely loves that you would share with our viewers and our listeners. Hey, you've got to grow this plant. And I'm going to guess with you, probably one of them is some sort of magnolia, right?
Yeah. I would say, since you put me on the spot, I'll say a magnolia. And one of my favorite magnolias, they're actually a group of magnolias, are the big leaf magnolias,
yes.
And there's several species that are native to the United States. And one in particular is the ash magnolia. It's Magnolia macrophylla, subspecies ashii. It has large leaves that kind of bring this tropical effect to the garden. It has large white fragrant flowers. It can be grown as out in the sun or as an understory plant. I know it's hardy in southwestern Michigan because it's. I have a colleague that has one in Chicago, and I think Chicago is probably colder than where you are. So I would say that for a tree. And then I love annuals and tropicals. And one of my favorite plants that I grow every summer is the red Abyssinian banana, which is Enseti morellii, or Enseti ventricosa morellii. It's great for just tropical effect in the summer garden.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Beautiful. Appreciate your time with us here on the Gardening Simplified show, Andrew. I can't imagine the effort and the number of people it takes to put together the Philadelphia Flower Show.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be with you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Well, not only should the Philadelphia Flower Show be on everyone's bucket list, but a trip to Philadelphia during the gardening season should also be on everybody's bucket list because it is one of the capitals of amazing public horticulture in our country. And with that, we wish you a very happy gardening week ahead. Thanks to Rick, thanks to Adriana, and thanks to all of you for listening.